The first sound Marcus Chen heard wasn't an alarm clock. It was the dying scream of a starship, burning through Earth's atmosphere at 3 a.m. He bolted upright in his cramped Chicago apartment, sweat coating his skin. The scream echoed in his mind, metal tearing, voices crying out in languages he'd never learned but somehow understood. His hands shook as he reached for his phone, but the device was dead. So was his laptop. Every piece of electronics in his apartment had gone dark. 3 blocks away, Sarah Martinez was experiencing the same nightmare. The former Marine sergeant had been sleeping peacefully when the sound hit her, not through her ears but directly into her brain. She found herself standing in her kitchen, a combat knife in her hand, scanning for threats that weren't there. Her body had moved before her mind caught up, muscle memory from wars she'd never fought flooding back. "What the hell?" she whispered, but her voice came out wrong, deeper, colder, like someone else was speaking through her throat. Across the city, similar scenes played out. David Kim, a mild-mannered accountant, woke up with blueprints for weapons he'd never seen, burned into his memory. Lisa Thompson, a kindergarten teacher, found herself calculating orbital mechanics and fleet formations while making her morning coffee. They were all hearing the same thing now, a low, thrumming pulse that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wasn't sound, it was deeper than that. It was a call to war that their bodies recognized even if their minds didn't. Marcus threw on clothes and stumbled outside. The streets were chaos. Car alarms wailed, the few cars that still worked. Most had simply died, their electronics fried, by whatever had passed overhead. People wandered in confused clusters, all wearing the same expression of someone trying to remember a dream that felt more real than waking life. "Did you hear it too?" A woman approached him, Sarah, though he didn't know her name yet. She moved like a soldier, her eyes constantly scanning for threats. "The ship? You saw it?" Marcus asked. "I thought I was going crazy." "We all saw it," David said, joining them. He was clutching a notebook filled with sketches that looked like technical specifications. "But that's impossible. I'm an accountant. I don't know anything about spacecraft design." "Then explain this," Lisa said, showing them her phone. The screen flickered with symbols that hurt to look at directly, alien text that somehow made perfect sense to all of them. "I can read it. I can read all of it." The message was simple and terrifying. "The sleepers have been located. Initiate. Harvest Protocol Sigma 7. Neutralize before they fully awaken." Sarah's expression hardened. "Someone's coming for us. Someone who knows what we are before we do." "What are we?" Marcus asked, but deep down he already knew. The knowledge was surfacing like air bubbles from the bottom of a dark lake. Memories that weren't his own. Training he'd never received. A war that had ended before his species had even discovered fire. "We're not just human," David said quietly, staring at his sketches. "We never were." The thrumming pulse grew stronger, and with it came more memories. Images of vast fleets darkening, the stars, worlds burning under the weight of cosmic war, and at the center of it all a species so terrifyingly effective at warfare that the galaxy had no choice but to make them sleep, make them forget, make them human. But now someone had rung the bell, and humanity was starting to remember what they really were. In the distance, the first of the harvest ships began their descent. Chapter 2, Fragments of War. The abandoned warehouse on the south side became their meeting place by necessity, not choice. Word had spread through social media before the networks went down, people experiencing the same impossible memories, the same sudden knowledge, the same feeling that they were actors who had forgotten they were on stage. By sunset, nearly 200 people had gathered. They came from every walk of life. Construction workers who suddenly knew how to build orbital platforms, nurses who could perform surgery on alien anatomy they'd never seen, college students who spoke dead languages from across the galaxy. Marcus found himself at the center of it all, though he couldn't say why. Maybe it was the way the tactical displays made perfect sense when he closed his eyes. Maybe it was how everyone naturally turned to him when decisions needed to be made. Or maybe it was the growing certainty that he'd commanded fleets before, massive, city-sized ships that could crack planets like eggs. "We need to establish a perimeter," Sarah was saying to a group of volunteers. They'd found weapons, not guns, but strange crystalline devices that had somehow materialized in their hands when the memories started flowing. Whatever's coming down from orbit, they're not here to talk. David had covered 3 whiteboards with calculations. Based on the energy signatures we're all sensing, they've got at least 12 capital ships in the fleet, each one carrying approximately 50,000 combat units. How do you know that? Someone asked. David looked up, his eyes unfocused. Because I designed ships exactly like them. 3,000 years ago. I was the head of their military engineering division. The room fell silent. Everyone was remembering pieces now. Fragments of lives lived in different bodies, on different worlds, in different times. They were archaeologists uncovering their own past, and each discovery was more terrifying than the last. Lisa approached Marcus, her kindergarten teacher demeanor completely gone. In its place was someone who moved with predatory grace, someone who understood violence in ways that made strong men step aside. We need to talk, she said. About what we really are, about why they put us to sleep. Marcus nodded and followed her to a quiet corner. You remember more than the others. I remember enough. Lisa's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. We weren't just soldiers, Marcus. We were the solution to a problem the galaxy couldn't solve any other way. What problem? The Devourers, a species that consumed entire solar systems, turning matter directly into energy to feed their expansion. They were unstoppable, until they met us. Marcus felt the memory crystallizing. The Devourers, biomechanical nightmares that stripped worlds bare, leaving nothing but empty space in the screams of dying civilizations. They'd conquered a third of the galaxy before anyone realized what was happening. The other species tried everything, Lisa continued. Conventional warfare, biological weapons, even collapsing stars on top of them. Nothing worked. So they did something desperate. They created us. They awakened us, she corrected. We were already there, sleeping in the genetic code of a primitive species on a little blue planet. All the galaxy's greatest minds working together to activate dormant neural pathways, to make us remember what we'd forgotten. Marcus felt the truth of it settling into his bones. Humanity wasn't naturally human. They were weapons, crafted by a desperate alliance and hidden away until they were needed. But we were too good at it, he said, the rest of the story unfolding in his mind. We didn't just stop the Devourers, we eliminated them completely, every trace of their existence scrubbed from the galaxy. And then we kept going. Lisa's expression was haunted. We were designed to be the perfect warriors, Marcus. We couldn't turn it off. World after world fell to us, not because we were evil, but because we were too efficient, too effective. We were ending civilizations just by existing. The warehouse had grown quiet around them. Others were remembering too, accessing the same terrible history. So they put us to sleep again, Sarah said, joining the conversation. Made us forget, turned us back into humans and hoped we'd stay that way. But someone woke us up, David added, looking up from his calculations. The question is why and who? Before anyone could answer, the first explosion shook the building. Through the grimy windows they could see lights descending from the sky. Not the gentle glow of rescue ships, but the harsh illumination of military craft designed for one purpose. Harvest ships, Marcus said, and the knowledge came with bone-deep certainty. They're not here to negotiate. They're here to collect us before we fully remember what we are. Sarah was already moving, distributing the crystal weapons to anyone who could hold them. How long do we have? Marcus closed his eyes and felt for the approaching fleet. The sensation was like flexing a muscle he'd forgotten he had. 20 minutes, maybe less. Then we'd better remember fast, Lisa said, her teacher's voice replaced by something infinitely more dangerous. Because ready or not, the war is coming to us. Outside, the first dropships began their final approach, and Marcus Chen, who had once commanded fleets that darkened stars, prepared to remember exactly why the galaxy had been so afraid of what humanity could become. Chapter 3. The Art of Cosmic War. The harvest ships landed like falling meteors, their impact shaking the entire south side. From his position behind an overturned truck, Marcus watched soldiers pour out of the craft, tall insectoid beings in powered armor that gleamed with energy fields. Kethmori, Sarah whispered beside him, the word emerging from memories buried for millennia. I remember them. They were part of the alliance that created us, and now they're here to clean up their mistake, David added from behind his improvised command post. He'd somehow assembled a communications array from scavenged electronics and sheer remembered knowledge. I'm picking up their tactical chatter. They're calling this a sleeper containment operation. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear, something else entirely. The satisfaction of pieces falling into place, of a puzzle finally becoming clear. He'd been wondering why the memories felt so natural, why his body seemed to know things his mind had forgotten. Now he understood. They weren't remembering how to be human weapons. They were remembering how to be themselves. Lisa, he called to the former kindergarten teacher, who was now coordinating defensive positions with the precision of someone who'd fought in 100 battles. Are you sensing what I'm sensing? She paused, her head tilted like she was listening to something only she could hear. The others, they're awakening too. She was right. All across the city, all across the world, Marcus could feel it. Minds lighting up like stars as the artificial constraints failed one by one. A construction worker in Detroit suddenly understanding orbital bombardment patterns. A chef in Tokyo who could now design weapons that bent space-time. A nurse in London whose hands remembered how to heal injuries that shouldn't exist on Earth. Humanity was waking up, and the galaxy was about to remember why they'd been so desperate to make them sleep. The first wave of Kethmori soldiers reached their perimeter. Sarah raised her crystal weapon, a sleek device that hummed with barely contained energy, and fired. The beam that emerged wasn't just light. It was focused destruction that turned matter into its component atoms. The soldiers' armor, designed to withstand planet-cracking weapons, simply ceased to exist. Well, Sarah said with grim satisfaction, at least we remember how to fight. But the Kethmori weren't amateurs. They'd come prepared for awakened sleepers, and their return fire was devastating. Energy beams that could vaporize tank armor carved through their cover like it was paper. We need to move, Marcus shouted over the sound of disintegrating concrete. David, tell me you've got something. Working on it. David's fingers flew over controls that hadn't existed 5 minutes ago, but now seemed as natural as breathing. I'm trying to access the city's power grid, but he never finished the sentence. His eyes went wide, pupils dilating as something vast and terrible downloaded itself into his consciousness. Oh, he said quietly. Oh, I see. The lights went out across Chicago. Not just in buildings, everywhere. Street lights, car headlights, even the glow from electronic billboards. The city plunged into darkness so complete it felt like being buried alive. Then David raised his hand, and the stars came down. What looked like lightning but felt like concentrated starfire erupted from his fingers, carving through the night toward the harvest ships. Where it struck, armor didn't just melt. It was transformed into something else entirely. Matter reorganized at the quantum level into forms that screamed in frequencies only the dying could hear. I remember, David said, his voice carrying harmonics that made reality ripple around him. I remember being the one who taught the universe how to make weapons from pure mathematics. The Kethmori forces regrouped quickly, but it was too late. All around the warehouse, people were accessing memories that predated human civilization. A teenager who'd been working part-time at a coffee shop was now bending gravity with her bare hands. An elderly man who'd retired from the postal service was creating shields from crystallized time itself. But Marcus knew it wasn't enough. He could feel the orbital fleet above them, could sense the massive weapons charging in space. The Kethmori weren't just here to capture awakened sleepers. They were prepared to sterilize the entire planet if necessary. They're going to Glass, the city, he announced, the tactical situation crystallizing in his mind. Orbital bombardment in 6 minutes. Can we stop them? Lisa asked. She was standing perfectly still, but Marcus could see space bending around her as she accessed powers that made nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. Not from here, Marcus said. We need to get to the ships. Sarah laughed, a sound with no humor in it. You want us to fight a space battle? We don't even have ships. Marcus looked up at the night sky, where the harvest fleet hung like a constellation of death, and smiled. It wasn't a human expression anymore. It was something older, something that had once made entire civilizations surrender, rather than face what was coming. Who said we need ships? He reached out with senses that had once coordinated battles across light years, touching the minds of every awakening human in the city. Then the state, then the continent, connection by connection, memory by memory, until he could feel them all, 7 billion sleeping weapons finally remembering what they were. Everyone, he said, his voice somehow carrying to every awakened mind on Earth. It's time to go to work. What happened next would later be called the Chicago Ascension, though historians would argue for decades about whether it was a battle, a natural disaster, or something else entirely. 200 humans rose into the night sky under their own power, moving through atmosphere and vacuum as easily as walking across a room. They didn't need ships or weapons or armor. They were the weapons, forged by a desperate galaxy to be the ultimate answer to ultimate threats. The harvest fleet had come expecting to face primitive humans who'd barely begun to remember. Instead, they found themselves face to face with gods of war who had decided to stop pretending to be anything else. Chapter 4. Gods of War Awakened. The vacuum of space should have killed them instantly. Instead, Marcus found himself breathing starlight, his body adapted to the cosmic environment, as naturally as a fish in water. Around him, 200 other awakened humans moved through the void with impossible grace, each one a weapon system that reality itself had been reshaped to accommodate. Below them, Earth hung like a blue marble, beautiful and fragile. Above them, the Kethmori harvest fleet spread across local space, 12 massive dreadnoughts, each one a city-sized instrument of destruction designed to end civilizations. Impressive, came a voice through quantum frequencies that bypassed the need for radio entirely. The speaker was Admiral Vexithani, commander of the harvest fleet, his insectoid features visible on displays that materialized in their minds. The sleepers remember faster than our models predicted. Marcus responded through the same impossible medium, his thoughts carrying the weight of stellar authority. Your models were always flawed, Vexithani. You designed us to be the perfect weapons, then convinced yourselves we could be controlled. You were meant to save the galaxy from the devourers. Instead, you became a threat greater than anything we'd ever faced. Because you made us too well. Sarah's voice joined the conversation, her consciousness now expanded to encompass tactical awareness spanning light years. You wanted beings capable of absolute warfare. You got exactly what you asked for. Around them, the awakened humans spread into formations that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. David's mathematical consciousness was reshaping local space-time, creating weapons platforms from folded reality itself. Lisa had become something that touched every living mind within 100,000 kilometers, a network of awareness that made traditional command structures obsolete. The conclave made its decision 3 millennia ago, Admiral Vexithani said. Humanity must sleep. Your species is too dangerous to remain conscious. And yet, Marcus replied, raising one hand toward the nearest dreadnought. You woke us up. Someone on your side sent that signal. Someone wanted us to remember. The pause that followed lasted exactly 2.7 seconds. Marcus counted because at this level of consciousness, time itself became a weapon to be wielded. Impossible, Vexithani said. But Marcus could taste the uncertainty in his quantum signature. That's when the real fleet arrived. They materialized out of folded space like nightmares given form, Ships that shouldn't exist, their hulls made from crystallized darkness and powered by the death screams of stars. Where the Kethmori vessels looked like instruments of war, these things looked like war itself had learned to take physical form. Devourers, Lisa whispered, her expanded awareness immediately cataloging the threat. But that's impossible. We eliminated them. Every trace, every genetic fragment, every quantum echo. We eliminated their bodies, David corrected, his mathematical mind now processing calculations that would drive normal computers to madness. But information cannot be destroyed, only transformed. Marcus understood. The Devourers hadn't died. When humanity had scrubbed them from existence 3,000 years ago, they'd simply changed state, becoming something that existed as pure hunger encoded in the quantum foam of reality itself. And now they were back, drawn by the signal that had awakened Earth's sleeping gods. This was the plan, he realized. Someone, in the conclave, made a deal. Wake us up, let us fight the harvest fleet, weaken both sides. Then harvest what remains. Admiral Vexthani finished, his tactical displays showing the same terrible understanding. My apologies, sleepers. It appears we have both been betrayed. The Devourer fleet began its attack run, ships that moved through dimensions like sharks through water. Their weapons weren't energy beams or kinetic projectiles. They were equations that rewrote the fundamental laws of physics wherever they struck. Reality itself began to unravel around the edges of their passing. Well, Sarah said, manifesting armor made from crystallized time around her transformed body. I always did prefer a fair fight. Marcus felt himself smile, an expression that now carried the weight of stellar phenomena. Around him, 200 awakened humans began to remember not just how to fight, but how to fight beings that existed outside the normal constraints of existence. Admiral, he said to Vexthani, temporary alliance? Against the Devourers? Agreed. But afterward, we'll see if the galaxy has learned anything in 3,000 years. The first Devourer ship reached weapons range, and Marcus, Chen, who had once been a mild-mannered data analyst from Chicago, reached out with senses that spanned galaxies and began to wage war on beings made of pure cosmic hunger. Below them, Earth turned in its orbit, unaware that the fate of not just humanity but all conscious life in the galaxy was being decided in the space above their heads. The real battle was about to begin. Epilogue. The New Equilibrium. 6 months after the Chicago Ascension. The morning sun streamed through the windows of what had once been Marcus Chen's cramped apartment. Now the space served as something between an embassy and a command center, where beings from across the galaxy came to negotiate with humanity's de facto representatives. Marcus stood at the window, watching the city below. Chicago looked normal, from this height. Traffic moving through streets, people going about their daily lives. But he could sense the changes, the awakening that had spread from that first night to encompass the entire species. Every human on Earth now carried the memories of what they had been, what they could become. Most had chosen to remain essentially human, using their awakened abilities sparingly. But others had embraced their true nature, becoming beings of such power that they existed as much in higher dimensions as in normal space-time. The conclave. Envoys are here, Sarah announced from the doorway. She still looked human, but Marcus could see the way reality bent slightly around her, accommodating the consciousness that now existed across multiple star systems simultaneously. Let them wait, Marcus said. They've had 3,000 years to think about this conversation. Through the quantum awareness that connected all awakened humans, he could feel his scattered people. David was currently exploring the galactic core, his mathematical consciousness mapping the fundamental structure of reality itself. Lisa had established contact with 17 different species, serving as humanity's first true interstellar diplomat. And everywhere, the question remained. What would humanity do now that they remembered what they were? The Devourers are gone, Sarah said, joining him at the window. Really gone this time. David's calculations confirm it. We found a way to eliminate them from the quantum level up. But the galaxy is still afraid of us. They should be. Marcus nodded. The final battle above Earth had lasted 6 hours and reshaped local spacetime permanently. When it was over, the Devourer fleet had been not just destroyed, but retroactively prevented from ever having existed. The Kethamori ships had limped away, carrying word of humanity's awakening to the rest of the galaxy. The message was simple. The sleeping gods were awake, and this time, there would be no putting them back to sleep. The Conclave is offering us membership, Sarah continued. Full recognition as a galactic power with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. In exchange for agreeing to certain limitations, restrictions on our expansion, monitoring of our activities, quotas on how many of us can achieve full awakening. Marcus laughed, a sound that made the apartment's walls vibrate in harmony with stellar frequencies. They still don't understand. We're not the same species they put to sleep 3,000 years ago. No, Sarah agreed. We've learned restraint. We've learned choice. That was the real change, Marcus reflected. The original awakened humans had been weapons, pure and simple, tools designed for absolute warfare with no consideration for the consequences. But these new awakened humans had lived as mortal beings first. They understood limitation, understood loss, understood that power without wisdom was just another form of destruction. Most of humanity had chosen to remain essentially human, using their awakened abilities to solve problems rather than dominate their neighbors. They were still the most individually powerful beings in the galaxy, but they were also parents and teachers and artists and dreamers. They were weapons who had learned to choose peace. What do we tell the Conclave? Sarah asked. Marcus turned. From the window, feeling the weight of 7 billion awakened minds looking to him for guidance. It was a responsibility he'd never asked for, but one he'd learned to carry. We tell them the truth, he said. Humanity is awake. We remember what we are, what we were created to be. But we also remember what we chose to become. He paused, feeling the quantum ripples as his words spread through the network of awakened consciousness that now spanned the Earth and beyond. We are the gods of war that the galaxy created in its desperation. But we are also the species that learned to choose mercy over might, growth over conquest, and wisdom over power. Sarah smiled, an expression that now carried the warmth of 1,000 suns. Think they'll understand? Eventually, Marcus said. They have time to learn. We're not going anywhere. Outside, the sun continued its ancient journey across the sky, shining down on a world where sleeping gods had awakened to discover they were still, fundamentally, human. And in the depths of space, the galaxy held its breath and wondered what humanity would choose to do next. The answer, as it turned out, was exactly what humans had always done best: surprise everyone, including themselves. End of Humans Are Sleeping War Deities, and someone just rang the bell.